Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brittnee. I am so excited to be finally posting this video. I have been so busy, it has just taken me forever, and per usual, I also got carried away with all my testing and color combinations. Anyway, I guess I should tell you what I'm going to do today. Do you remember this last Valentine's Day when I posted this video? I tested some chocolate stamps made by Makeat, designed by Andre Dubovic. Well, Makeat reached out to me and asked if I wanted to design my very own chocolate stamp. What? Well, obviously I said yes. So I brainstormed for a little bit, but it didn't take me very long to come up with my final theme. It's all I could think about for the first week after I said yes. So I didn't want the design theme to be too specific to like a holiday or a special interest. I wanted it to be able to apply to everyone. I also wanted it to be intricate and really detailed. And I knew that my future self might regret that because it's harder to stamp, but I did it anyway. And I also wanted it to be a circular pattern, kind of like a mandala. So what I decided on is a kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscopes have really pretty patterns and are also really colorful. So I just figured it would be a great theme to play around with chocolate bonbons. So to design my stamp, I sketched out a bunch of kaleidoscopes. Then I sent my designs to Makeat, and they came back with some suggestions on which ones would be too detailed and which ones would work nice. I continued drawing more. They're just so fun to design, honestly. I just couldn't stop. And then I picked my favorites and I did like a million versions of each of my favorites until finally I had to just pick one. And this is the one that I chose. And this is my final stamp. I'll show you some more detailed shots right now. So let's get into testing my chocolate stamp because I am so excited to show you all of my different experiments. Here we go. So here is my Kaleidoscope Stamp topper. They sent it to me in 2 sizes, but I can't find a mold for the larger one, so I'm only testing the standard size today. Here's the handle. You just need one of these, and then you can swap out any of the stamp tops with it. And the mold that fits these stamps is Chocolate World 2022. The first step is always to make sure you have a clean and polished mold. I like to take some food grade ethanol and cotton balls to shine up my mold before I use it. The first stamp technique I'm testing out today is dry edible gold luster dust straight down into the mold. The process is similar to stamping dry powder onto finished bonbons. The easiest way to get the luster onto the stamp is to stamp it into a nice layer of luster dust. The reason you don't want to use a paintbrush to put the luster dust right onto the stamp is because you tend to get too much luster dust and a lot of loose luster that all falls off when you stamp. So the best way that I have found to do it is to brush the dry luster onto a flat surface that you can reuse over and over so that you don't waste your luster dust, and then use that almost as if you would an ink pad to press your stamp into to get a nice coating onto the stamp. For this, one of the lids from the restaurant containers I use for cocoa butter works perfect. So I kind of just spin the stamp into the luster dust to get most of it coated, and then to make sure I get the edges good, I roll it sideways across the luster a couple of times. And then you just stamp it right into the mold. With the luster dust, you can put a decent amount of pressure in order to make sure the whole pattern transfers nicely to the surface of the mold. Once I've stamped my whole mold, all I have to do to finish it is spray the background, but I'll do that later, so for now I'll just set this aside. To clean off my stamp for the next technique, I start with some ethanol and a cotton pad. Once I get a decent amount off of the surface, I take it to my sink with just water and dish soap, and I use a straw cleaner to get into all the little crevices. Now I temper my black chef rubber pre-colored cocoa butter to test out my next stamp technique, which is to sponge the cocoa butter right onto the stamp and then stamp it directly into the mold. If you need help tempering cocoa butter, check out my tutorial in this card. At this point, I just assume you all know that anytime I use cocoa butter, it is tempered first, even though I don't usually show that full step, but some of you might be new here and not know that, so now you know. I always use tempered cocoa butter. So this is pretty straightforward. I want to get some cocoa butter onto my sponge and then carefully sponge the stamp. You saw that I used my mini metal spatula to pick up some cocoa butter and then dip the sponge into that. That's because I don't want the sponge to absorb too much cocoa butter, because then when I apply it to the stamp, I am really careful to not press down too hard and get it all over and down into the cracks, just so that when I stamp, it gets a really clean image without extra cocoa butter running down and messing up the design. Also, if you try out this technique, you will learn that the working temperature of the cocoa butter will affect the result. So if it's on the warmer end of working temp, you'll get a thinner coat that potentially looks lighter and might even have some smooth, thin spots. If it's on the cooler end, you'll get more suction texture, but the coating will be more opaque and thicker. My favorite thickness for the cocoa butter to be at for this technique is about the same as acrylic paint. And I can't really give you a temperature for that because that thickness will be different depending on your cocoa butter brand, the color, and even how long it's been sitting and how tempered it is. So really, I just go by feel. You can see I had a couple inconsistent stamps as I was finding the right thickness and temperature, how much cocoa butter to apply to the stamp, as well as how much pressure to use when stamping it into the mold. For this technique, you don't want to press too hard that you squish the cocoa butter out of its design, but enough that the stamp touches the whole mold. Minus just a handful of cavities, this technique I think gives really consistent results. I think it especially works well with black cocoa butter because it's so dark you don't really get a lot of that stamping suction texture like you do with white cocoa butter. Now I'll set this mold aside until it's time to spray the background. Now I need to prepare a couple molds for my last technique, which is the technique the stamp was created for, I'd say. It is where you heat up the stamp and then use it to melt the design into the cocoa butter. So I'm going to be applying my Bonbon background colors into the mold first. This first color is called Oh My Magenta by Chef Rubber, and I'm just spraying the thinnest coat as possible into my mold using my airbrush. Having thin and even layers of cocoa butter is an important part of this technique. The next color I used is Turquoise of the Jewel Collection by Chef Rubber, and I use this color to finish spraying the rest of this mold. While I've got my airbrush out, I'll spray the backgrounds of the first two techniques. So for half of the gold luster dust design, I'll use this really pretty color by Pastry Chef's Boutique called Peacock Green. And for the second half of this mold, I used my black cocoa butter from Chef Rubber. And then while I'm at it, I use this ice blue zircon from the Jewel Collection by Chef Rubber to back half of my black stamped design. And I started out with this technique where the center will be lighter than the edges, but I changed my mind because I felt like the color was too light for it to look cool. So I just fill in the mold with a solid blue instead. For the last half of that mold, I used French Fuchsia by Pastry Chef's Boutique. And then I decided this color would be a lot cooler to use that technique where it is darker on the edges. So I did it here and just ignore the cavities with other colors inside. I was doing some experiments on this mold, but ended up not liking them. All right, to coat my last mold to test out with the melt out technique, I wanted some color. Kaleidoscopes are so colorful, and so I wanted to somehow make some bonbons like that. I had to temper all these colors and try to keep them all in temper as I worked. I put them all in my chocolate warming tank. It did all right, but I still had to use my heat gun to keep them warm enough to work with. Obviously, this is not practical whatsoever, but you guys know I just had to try it out. So what I did was just use tiny sponge brushes to add all the colors of the rainbow in order around the mold cavity like this. Now the kaleidoscope I have is actually called a tunnel scope. It has this clear tube, and when you look through it, you see colorful spirals. So I wanted to test applying my cocoa butter colors in spirals like this as well. Now for this technique, you need some sponges to clean your melted cocoa butter out of the mold with. I have this huge pack of assorted sponge shapes, so I figured I'd use them up. But you want them to be somewhat rounded to clean the mold easier, so I chopped them all up a bit. So I really wanted to get better at this technique, so I did a couple things different than I did the first time I tried it at Valentine's Day. First thing was that I gave my background colors a full day in the wine cooler to crystallize before stamping. That way the cocoa butter outside of the pattern was less likely to shift or melt when I stamp because it's more stable. The other thing that I tried this time was hit a specific temperature with the stamp when I heated it with my heat gun. And I can't even remember what temperature I was aiming for. I found a guide online and I can't find it now. And then Andre recommends on his Instagram to keep the molds between 18 to 19 degrees Celsius. So here we go. Aha! I was so nervous because my design is so intricate. And it worked. And here's me celebrating. I was seriously so nervous. So I kept going with the same method. I will say though, I did find it hard to get a good reading on the stamp temperature, so eventually I gave that up, which is why it doesn't even really matter that I forgot what the temperature was. In Andre's post on his Instagram, he doesn't even give a temperature for the stamp. He just says heat it up for 10 seconds. So I don't know. Measuring the temperature of the stamp was so inconsistent for me, and I didn't even feel like it was getting an accurate reading. So instead, I tried to just do the same amount of heat each time. I also was trying to stamp multiple cavities at a time. Sometimes that worked well, and other times it really didn't. Like, they look okay, but not perfect. I don't know why this technique is such a struggle for me. I just feel like there are so many variables, like how thick your cocoa butter is, the temperature of the mold, the temperature of the stamp, if the stamp is heated up evenly, how long you hold it into the mold, how hard you press it into the mold, how soft or firm your sponge is, and how much and how well you clean out the cavity. It's just so hard to perfect. But as you can see here, my molds look clean, right? Keep this in mind for later, because one thing I've for sure learned is I need to be more meticulous when wiping out the melted cocoa butter. And on these darker colors, if they aren't perfectly clean, you can definitely tell later on. It's so crazy because Andre says don't press the stamp in. You really just have to quickly touch the hot stamp to the cocoa butter. But then sometimes I do that and it doesn't even melt through. But then other times it melts too much, which is probably from the inconsistent heat on the stamp. But then it's so hard to measure how hot the stamp is. Also, because it's round, it's kind of hard to get it evenly warm. Seriously guys, I will take any tips from you on this technique. I'm determined to perfect it and will keep trying. Yay! I ended on a good note with this one. This one is a nearly perfect stamp, I'd say. Okay, now time for my colorful kaleidoscopes. I knew this would be sketch for sure, because there was no way to apply all these colors in a super thin, even coat. So I definitely knew that the uneven coat from the sponge would make it a little tough to get a good stamp out, but you'll see in a second how it went. Also, I'm sorry, but I had a genius idea to use the melted cocoa butter I stamped out to stamp in to the other side of the mold. And I'm so glad I thought of this because these ones might be some of my favorites finished. Now, if only I could come up with a different way to apply all the colors to repeat this technique. Maybe I could temper all the colors and just do the Stampin' technique the normal way like I showed you earlier. It would just be really hard to get all the cocoa butter on quickly before it starts setting up. If anyone has an idea, let me know. All right, now it's time to back all my bonbons except the black ones with white. This is just Chef Rubber Alabaster White. And I shelled all of the molds in dark chocolate. If you want a video tutorial on my molding process, I will link a couple different ones in the description. I also have a handy PDF guide on my full process with tips and important steps, linked down below. I filled these bonbons with a salted caramel. Some also have a cookie crunch layer, you'll see. And then just to be a little extra, I decided to cap a couple of the molds using diffraction grading sheets. I have a fun video on these and how they work that I'll link in this card and in the description below. So check it out if you don't know how they work. It's super cool. I felt that the holographic chocolate just fit this theme so well. Okay, but the sheets weren't big enough to cover my mold, so I had to line them up and tape them. Also, they come in a roll, which made them a little tricky to use because they kept curling up on me. It's a tiny bit messy, but honestly not too bad. And the last two molds I capped just like normal. Now let's see how they all turned out. My favorite part is unmolding, as you know, because we get to see if all of our hard work paid off. I love these pink ones. Okay, a lot of these look pretty good. The diffraction grating, you just pull off and then unmold. Oh yeah, so shiny. Very colorful. Now let's take a closer look at each design technique. The gold luster dust technique. Pretty much foolproof. The design itself looks pretty flawless. It's very easy to do. Gold always pairs great with black, and black bonbons are always a good idea. They are as shiny as it gets. These look so trippy to me though for some reason. Maybe because the gold has the exact same texture as the black cocoa butter. I love the subtle look of the dry powder. I can't really describe what it looks like. It's almost like it's right under the surface of water or something. It's so cool to me. And look how pretty this green is. It's slightly teal, which you guys know is my favorite color. It's giving the Emerald City from The Wizard of Oz. Now, you could also do this technique with wet luster dust using alcohol or lemon extract to sponge it onto the stamp and into the mold like we did with the cocoa butter. I think it would make the luster dust pop more, but honestly, I kind of love this subtle look. The cocoa butter stamp in technique. Honestly, look how clean those lines are. I feel like these are pretty consistent. And see how with the black cocoa butter, you don't see too much of that stamp texture? You can a little, but not much. Lighter colors are never as shiny as darker colors, so this pastel blue isn't my favorite, but they still look pretty crisp. The pink, on the other hand, I love them. I love the design technique where the center is lighter and the black really pops on that bright pink, and the pink is nice and shiny as well. Something about this kaleidoscope pattern in black reminds me of stained glass. This stamp definitely could have also been named after that. I think you guys can already tell I prefer this technique. It's so many less steps and so many less variables that could go wrong. You just need the right thickness of cocoa butter, know how much pressure to stamp with, and have a steady hand. It's pretty easy, and my results with it are always more consistent. It's also a lot faster. Let's now look at the cocoa butter melt out technique. The first thing you might notice that I mentioned earlier is I need to do a bit better with cleaning out the melted cocoa butter. It's so weird. When I was doing it, they totally looked clean. But once you get that white background on, whew, you can see so much leftover purple. But I will say this dark purple looks pretty and sharp with the white lines. And here is the turquoise. I think they're pretty. This cocoa butter has a bit of a shimmer to it that's really nice in person, but hard to capture with this camera. And here are my rainbow kaleidoscopes. Obviously, there were a lot where the pattern is inconsistent. I think it's really hard with the uneven cocoa butter coating. But then once again, you'll see that I need to do a better job wiping out the cocoa butter. Still really fun though. Totally impractical, but I like them anyway. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the spiral ones didn't really turn out at all. I don't even think I got one clean one. Ugh. But check out how the holographic bottoms turned out. It's such a fun surprise, I think, to add to a bonbon. Okay, Time for my favorite ones. I love these ones. Funny enough, they turned out better than the original rainbow idea. All right, guys, that is my chocolate stamp I created with Makeat called Kaleidoscope. If you liked the video, please like the video. Also, leave me a comment which final design is your favorite and which method. Every time I try out these stamps, I just discover that painting the stamp and stamping it in is easier for me. I don't know if any of you guys have even more tips for me. Some of them turned out pretty good, but they are still not consistent for me. I don't know why this technique is so hard, but it just is. But you know, stamping in the cocoa butter still works. And honestly, I like the results. I also think it's a lot easier to use that way, but that's just me. Oh, also, in case you're wondering, they are not currently selling my stamp, but Makeat is an awesome company and they've been so cool to work with in this collaboration. They seem open to trying new things with me. So if you would be interested in buying my stamp design, maybe we'll just have to let them know. And I wonder if we could get them to make it and sell it for us. And also, I kind of got addicted to drawing these patterns and there were so many cool ones, but I just had to pick one. But I actually think it would be really fun to do a collection of Kaleidoscope stamps, like a set of 4 sold together. So just throwing that out there as an idea. Anyway, let me know what you think of my stamp and all of these designs. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, today's the day. If you'd like to see something else that sweet, just click on one of these thumbnails. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.